Ugh.
What were you just saying, Zane?
Oh, come on.
We're live. Dallas Winston, Bloody Elbow, Vivisection. Hi. I am extremely fortunate today to be accompanied by my fine, esteemed colleagues, Connor and his cat. Connor, what's your cat's name?
This is Cleo.
Cleo, like Aunt Cleo? Does that cat take phone calls? Because I've
Cleo,
spoken to her.
like the Greek muse of history.
Whoa. Geez, see, there I was all, whatever, telemarketing, whatever that is, but you actually have
Oh,
some.
she's a psychic, isn't she?
Yeah, I've literally spoken to her
Yeah,
before.
yeah, Connor's not so déclassé as to name his cat
Yeah, Dallas,
after
I
a.
He also says
I don't
vase.
name my cat after
Yeah.
celebrities. I say things like vase and
No, you don't. You
No,
say
you
vase.
You say vase, and then we make fun of you for it.
yeah. Viewers, before the show, we were discussing how people pronounce vase, and apparently I'm the only person who doesn't say vases, which is mind-boggling to me.
I think
Well,
it's
that's
plural.
because you
Because I
bovine
would say
syphilis.
vase. But for some reason, if there's more than one vase, plural, I would go vases. But I did throw in the catch that I might be wrong and I might sound like Niles and Fraser Crane whilst saying it.
Sometimes trying to go for correct grammar, it fucks you up too. Because I had a friend recently who said die, like as in a single die
Hmm.
for playing games.
He doesn't
And then
play
he said-
D&D.
But then
We
he said
cut his fucking
dies.
head off with a plus 20 acid-wielding sword for that.
He said die, but then he said dies instead of dice. Like it screwed him up all over the place.
Therefore,
Well,
he
that's
should
just
have
fun.
dies.
Well, that's like, it's horrible to know that it's actually octopuses and rhinoceroses.
Yeah.
It's not octopi.
It's not octopi.
See, I would have got busted on that one right
It's only
there.
like cacti. It's cacti is like the only one that works like that, and then everybody else just extrapolated from that for all the other similar words that end in sus.
God, maybe I'm a real jackass because not
US?
3 months ago I pulled out cacti when a couple of my buddies were saying cactuses. I was like, you fucking inbred hicks, it's cacti. Thank God we weren't staring at a bunch of octopuses.
No,
There you
I don't
go.
think you're not truly a pedantic jackass unless I think if you're at the point where the word television upsets you for being a combination of Greek and Latin, then you're an asshole. Because I've
Well,
known
yeah.
some people who refuse to say the word television because tele is Greek and vision is Latin, and it infuriates them.
Oh yeah, it's cross-pollinating the genres. That's offensive to
Oh, okay.
humanity.
Dallas is a
No,
jackass.
I didn't know that. I did always want to say. I always thought it was cool. I don't know who says it, like UK people, like telly,
Mm.
not the phone, the vision telly. All right, so viewers, this is the
Anyway.
kind of scintillating hook we try to throw
Yeah.
at you just to draw you into the face punching we're about to discuss.
Now that
It
we've got
also
your
is a great
attention.
example of just how excited we are for UFC Fight Night Bangor.
Whoa! Hold on. I'm looking forward to this card. I want to say that right now. I think this
I'm
is-
not okay, but are you like amped for this card? Like, what's your big money fight?
Yeah.
I don't honestly. Unfortunately, the money fight is one that I probably won't get to see live. That which brings us to before we get into the nuances of it. The bout order on this card is literally the only thing that's bad about this card. Otherwise, it's a
Yeah.
stellar array of fight night level fights. But the fact that McMahon and Makovsky are both on the prelims on Fox Sports 2, a channel that nobody has, doesn't really make any sense to me.
It's true.
Especially over the first three on the main card. Tavares
Yeah.
Peralta, it is Tiago's featherweight debut after being a lightweight. Sean Jordan and Jack May. I can kind of get that one because someone's probably taking a nap. But Basinski, Juban, maybe they're just really high on Juban. But I would take one of those. I'd probably put Formuggin Makovsky up on the main over McMahon Murphy. Is that terrible?
Well, considering
no.
that McMahon's just off a title, maybe a little terrible.
No, but I think the fact that she's just off a title is reason not to, not to publicize her as much as the guy who's probably going to be fighting for the title next.
This is true.
Makovsky-
Yeah, either
That's what I
way,
was gonna
you have top 5 fighters that are viable potential contenders. I mean,
for sure.
McMahon could get another shot at the belt.
She
pretty
probably
easily.
will. I mean, McMahon is a solid fighter, and she has been improving despite how easily Rousey beat her. I
Yeah.
think part of the reason Rousey beat her in the first place is that she did not expect her to go ham on her in the clinch the way she did.
Yeah.
Who did though? I don't think anybody did.
Yeah. No,
Um,
McMahon was clearly in full-on wrestling mode in the clinch, and then she got kneed in the liver. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
shame in that.
No.
yeah, how frustrating has that got to be? You're preparing for an Olympic judoka, so obviously you're, an Olympic wrestler yourself. You're all ready in the clinch, and you get there, and there's no grappling. There's just a discharge of violent knees, and that's it. Your title aspirations die.
Yeah. I mean, Rousey is depressing all sorts of people who really want to be on her hate train.
Indeed. All right, so well, before we actually get into what we're supposed to be doing, since we're just meandering at this point, how many flyweight matchups have there been on a UFC main card
Less
besides
than
the
10.
title fights?
Outside of title fights? Yeah, I don't know. Not many.
I mean, it's basically John Lineker's been there a few times, but is he even a flyweight? He's,
Burn.
yeah.
Inability
He's
to make weight
he'd
burn.
be a super flyweight if that was such a thing in MMA.
He is a super flyweight. Way
Super.
to go.
I kind of like that. That's a good way to look at it. He's like Mark Hunt back in the day, like kind of a flyweight, but 15% heavier on a normal basis. All right, seriously, this is getting ugly. I forget that there are people watching this. So, you guys ready to go through the card? Zane, I guess Connor gave us his thoughts. Zane, what are your? I didn't even introduce you. Zane, this is Zane Simon. Everyone, Zane, say hello.
Yeah, for those that don't know me. I will say I am looking generally forward to this card going down it. I do think that the UFC, after a really bad start to this year, like the first 6 months of this year for matchmaking, first maybe even like 6 to 7 months were bad. Like it just they hired a bunch of new fighters and it felt like they were just trying to feel out who all these guys were and then what to do with them and how to structure their cards. And it feels like lately, I mean, there aren't a lot of really exciting fights on this card, but there should be a lot of good quality scraps that should be fun to watch at the end of the night.
I agree with that. The overall star power isn't super strong on this card, but I think there's going to be some really good scraps here. There's a lot of big heart, aggressive fighters here. And I guess we'll also say what you were talking about, Zane. It was the first time I ever got deflated about MMA in general, and that became a thing. We did a couple shows.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just, exclusive to me or Bloody Elbow or a few people. I remember, I won't say names, but prominent outlets, junkie MMA fighting guys saying, Jesus, has the UFC finally killed the hardcore fan? They had that run, and to me, it consummated with the show where they had two in the same day. One was in Brazil. And I always say this, it was because I was doing play-by-play for both of them, but it was like 8 hours of my life that I just did not enjoy whatsoever. So anyways, my point was, if in fact they were receptive to that feedback and now they're making the shows better, which they seem to be, I mean, kudos to the UFC for listening to the fan base.
Well, I think we're experiencing a bit of an artificial bump in pleasure at this card too, because we've had 3 weeks off, two and a half weeks off of MMA now. Because if you look at the schedule, we have another 2 events in one day coming up soon.
When's that?
That's the Bisping versus Lee is on the same day as
Henderson Dos Anjos.
Yeah, as Henderson
Is it
Dos
really?
Anjos.
Yep.
That seems wrong. Like that takes away from both of those fights.
I mean, when you really think about it, you can't fault the UFC for it. The problem is that all of us are used to the UFC being the place where the best of the best go, and so that's where you go to see like the really high-profile fights and everything. And the UFC is trying to make themselves the entire sport, including these fights that you don't care about seeing. They're trying to make themselves the regional and the international and the domestic big leagues all at once. Because like in boxing, if you look at boxing as a sport, you can miss 50% of the shows and still be a very viable hardcore fan. You're still a guy who watches all the fights of like up and comers and everything.
Yeah.
There's just so much boxing out there. But the thing is, not all that boxing is labeled. Well, nowadays it is all labeled as title fights and shit. But you know what I mean? You, as a boxing fan, you're used to knowing that there are fights that you can easily miss. Whereas we're not used to the UFC being a can-miss event yet.
Yeah, but I mean, I think to me it's more like they've been signing so many fighters, like so many fighters, and for the first half of this year, it really just felt like they were like, whoa, shit, we just need to like get these guys fights. Go on, go, get out there, see what happens, see who wins. We don't know. Maybe it'll be fun. And now it actually feels like they're getting a lot more like, okay, we've had these guys have all had fights, and they're starting to like mix in the prospects rather than just dumping them on cards. And just you got like some really weird, long stretches of boring fights where it'd just be like 15 decisions in a row,
Yeah.
none of which were particularly exciting. And it feels like they're doing a lot better idea or like scouting now, like figuring out exactly who these fighters are and matching them appropriately to make interesting matchups.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, you ready to bang through this?
Yeah.
Connor, I'm glad you mentioned Fox Sports 2, even though I have it written down here. I don't think I get Fox Sports 2, and I don't think a ton of people do.
I don't know
Same.
anybody who does.
So how do we watch this shit?
It's barely better distributed than Fuel.
Well, technically you don't, Dallas. Technically you don't watch it. That's unfortunately, I mean, what can you say? Like nobody gets it.
I mean, you have to wonder what the UFC's plan is here. Is Fox pressuring them to put a few of the bigger names on Fox Sports 2, and so they're like hedging their bets and doing the smallest of the bigger names, like from the smaller weight classes and the women that aren't Ronda Rousey? Or
I would be willing to bet that that's part of it. That Fox seems to be pushing them to make sure that there's always quality content on any of the channels that they put their card on.
Yeah, but I mean, they could grow flyweight. I mean, flyweight has potential because, whereas the lighter weight classes aren't necessarily huge in the U.S. in boxing, there are definitely lots of popular fighters, and also Mighty Mouse is. I mean, people are attracted to perfection, and Mighty Mouse is a guy who is becoming unbeatably perfect at this sport at the highest level. Like, you need to get on that train early and advertise it, because we saw how long it took Anderson Silva to become a draw. He was perfect for a long time in the UFC before he really started to develop a name. You have to push it so that people know, holy shit, this guy was perfect 2 years ago, and he's even more perfect now. He's on a 10-fight win streak against champion contenders. That's unbelievable. But now we have nobody even knows how good Makovsky is because he's consistently on the prelims. This time on a channel nobody gets.
That's why I asked how many flyweight fights that were non-title fights were aired. Because then one of the big complaints is when DJ is getting ready to smash the next contender, no one knows who the hell it is. And I don't really see that problem going away by not only putting them on the preliminary card, but then putting the preliminary card on Fox Sports 2.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that Makovsky's a genuinely interesting fighter to watch too. I mean, he's a guy with serious technique to display, and he knocks people down, and he passes, and he goes for submissions, and he's fast and athletic. Like, he's a fun fighter to watch. So it wouldn't really be a hard sell for him to be on the main card. People see one higher profile fight of his doing his thing, and they'll say, wow, I want to see this guy fight the champ.
Yeah, so if it were backwards world, we'd say, haha, Bellator washout is destined to fight for the UFC title. UFC fighters suck, LOL. F you. You with me on this, guys?
UFC does suck.
Yeah. My point was, it's just annoying that no matter what, a UFC guy always has like a plus 20. There's someone planted the D&D seed in my head earlier. Damn you for that. Reminds me of psilocybin in small containerized spaces. Anyways, you know what I'm saying. I mean, Makovsky has really turned it on and looked good, but that's another great example of why maybe we shouldn't always say any UFC guy is going to smoke any. You know what I mean? Shit. Let me not go down that road. Let's start at the bottom of the card. What are we, like 17 hours in and we're just starting? All right. Two, I believe, if I say anything stupid, you guys just correct me, be a pal. Two flyweight debutantes.
Bantamweight. Unless they were actually dropped, I believe it's bantamweight. Unless...
Really? Frankie Saenz was the King of the Cage flyweight champion.
I know he was, but he's taking this fight on a week and a half or 2 weeks' notice, so it's a bantamweight fight. Yep.
Okay, so here's something else that kind of bothers me. How do you always know what official weight a fight is at? Because I researched this card, and where does it say?
UFC, for the UFC, when they add them to their roster, they add them to the division that the fight's going to be at, unless they fuck it up, which they do one time out of every 20. So they added both these fighters to bantamweight on their UFC.com. They have them listed at 135 pounds, and
Okay, that's awesome. So now instead of checking 7 different fights just to find out who people are and what weight they're fighting at, now I have to check 8 that has a 60% accuracy ratio.
Well, also, yeah, and Wikipedia, for as bad as it is, also lists the weight classes next to the fighters on the card. So
Well, damn it. So you for sure this fight is at bantamweight?
yeah, I'm 99% sure.
Hmm. Well, either way, okay. So the flyweight champion of King of the Cage is Frankie Saenz, and he's
Hmm.
fighting Nolan Tickman.
Yep.
And both of these guys have, I want to say, most of or all their losses are to larger fighters. I think they were featherweights, not bantamweights. But all right. So either way, Zane, why don't you just tell me what you're thinking about this matchup?
Okay. Well, this is an interesting. This is a decent fight for a couple of prospects that I mean, Sands, they're really getting him at his peak. He's got to be in his prime right now. He's in his early 30s. He's been fighting for a little while.
He's
Um,
34, I believe, right?
yeah,
So
I think
towards the
so.
end of the peak,
So maybe, well,
perhaps.
yeah, but he hasn't been fighting that long. So, uh, he shouldn't like he should be sort of like what's his name who just fought and beat Neil Paul Harris, uh, Neil Seary. Guy who's been around for a while. But I mean, Sands has only been fighting since 2009, so he's really hasn't been around a long time. Has a wrestling background. Wrestled for Arizona State ASU just before the Kane Dalloway days,
How did he
and
do? I didn't know that. How did he do at
uh,
ASU?
I don't know. I can't tell you how good he was, but I know he was on the team, and he's definitely a good wrestler. I mean, what I really like when I see from him is that he's really developed a nice dump game, which as silly as that sounds, but for he's sort of like got that Frankie Edgar thing going where he likes to shoot in, grab onto a double or a single, and then just push his opponent over and release, and then try and punch him and kick him as they come up off the takedown. He works that really well. He punches to the body in combination well. He's not a great striker from the outside and not great in combination. He doesn't sit down in the pocket well on his strikes. But Tickman is a total unknown. Trains out of Rain MMA Rain, I
King's
believe.
MMA.
Yeah, King's MMA. Um, and he hasn't fought in 2 years. His last fight was okay, but not great. He's got a lot of natural athleticism, a lot of natural power, but he doesn't have much of a punching game yet.
His last fight against Goncalves or
Yeah,
Goncalves, however you say that.
Gonsalves.
Did you see the double alternating roundhouse kick he threw?
Yes,
Fucking beautiful.
he's got great athleticism. Obviously, a great natural athlete. Wrestled for Cal State Fullerton as well, so he also comes from a wrestling background. But at this point, I guess I'd say if Tickman hasn't improved any over his 2 years off, then he's going to lose this fight.
Before I turn it over to Connor, 2 quick observations. I had on Tickman from watching him that he was aggressive and pretty talented, kind of an exciting fighter, but still noticeably unpolished and a bit
Yeah,
wild at times. Would you agree with that?
yeah, he's really raw.
And the last one before I turn it over to Connor, when you said that Signs has a good dump game, I specifically refrained from making a Yo Romero joke.
Nice.
Connor? Connor, your thoughts?
You handed that one over quick. Like if anybody's shouting at their screen right now, they'll be inadvertently shouting at
Come on,
Connor.
Connor. We're talking about fights here.
Um, yeah. Boy.
Well said.
Yeah, way to go, Zane. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting fight. I think that the fact that I also did not realize that it was happening at bantamweight. That kind of makes it an interesting dynamic because to me, Saenz is the more sure thing as a fighter. He's, you know, he's got a game that he's kind of coming into his own stylistically, and
Yeah.
he's beaten some experienced guys on the regional level. Like he's beaten some solid upper level journeymen,
Hmm.
and so I think he's actually at the point right now where he is, unlike many new signees, he's ready to be in the UFC. Like this is a good time to test the
Yeah.
waters for him. Whereas I mean, it's hard for me to look at a guy 5 fights into his career against even. I mean, that guy you mentioned, Gonsalves, not exactly a guy that you should brag to everybody that you beat. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
no slight meant to him. It's just he hasn't really beaten anybody. I'm going to go with another one of my crackpot theories here. I would like to point out that Nolan Tickman has a win by knee bar, which is almost a sure thing to me, a sure sign to me that he's fighting substandard competition. Because it's a very rare man who hits weird submissions at low-level MMA and is beating guys who, you know what I mean? Good guys don't usually get hit by knee bars.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I
mean,
was
I will
laughing.
say because, shout out to Wyman because he trains with or has trained with Tickman and like that's his gym. Is that he was at least able to tell me that his one loss, which is to easily his best competition, was a fight that he was winning that he lost to like by
Yeah.
cut.
And the guy
So
was a featherweight too.
yeah. So I mean, I do think that Tickman has the base athleticism and some of the base skills and training to be a good fighter. So certainly training under Rafael Cordero is gonna only help that. But this is like it's just a total unknown. You can't look at this guy and say, "Oh,
Yeah.
I know what I'm getting" when he walks out there.
And he doesn't have the fundamentals yet from what I've seen. He's got the
Yeah,
aggression, which is a Rafael Cordero trademark, but that kind aggression without fundamentals tends to work against guys who have not faced tough opposition yet.
yeah,
And Frankie Saenz is not that guy. He's faced some solid fighters and beaten them like in a tactical, intelligent fashion. He's
yeah,
putting on good jiu-jitsu clinics and good wrestling and making things happen at a relatively high regional level. So it's hard. I mean, this is no slight to Tickman. You just can't. He hasn't fought anybody that tells us what kind of pressure he can handle or what kind of competition. He hasn't shown us his bar yet.
yeah.
So
This is one of those fights where I get the feeling like 2 years from now, Tickman might win it 9 times out of 10. But right now, I don't like because I think he is the better athlete and he's
mhm.
probably got more upside. But right now, it's just like, well, I haven't seen anything that suggests to me that you're a well-developed, well-rounded fighter at
So
all.
Connor, are you taking signs?
Yeah, I think Science is a pretty clear safe bet here, and Tickman easily has the potential to surprise me and prove me wrong. But as a safe bet, I've got to go with Science.
And Zane, did Wyman indicate why Tickman's been out for so long?
No, he didn't know. I asked him, and I have no idea. I looked for any injury news, anything like that. Nothing.
Hmm. Okay, so I'll probably take Tickman just because, and to me, the way I'm looking at it, everything you guys said makes sense. You got a smaller guy who's more experienced, and I did look up Sainz' record, and he's not beaten 2-2, 2-3 guys. I mean, especially with I think his last string of 4 or 5 wins or
Mhm.
whatever he had. I mean, they're pretty legit opponents, especially for the regional scene.
Well, and his only
Tickman,
loss is to what, Russell Doan, I want to say?
he's got 2 losses,
Ooh,
doesn't he?
Science
One's by
lost two,
DQ. So
Yeah,
that doesn't.
DQ.
and
Oh,
Cody
okay. No,
Heward
it's
is his
Cody.
loss.
It's Cody Heward. Never mind. It's just nobody special. Never
Yeah.
mind. I was thinking of somebody else who got signed.
So I'm looking at Tickman as a guy who not only from your Connor's point about Rafael Cordero, I should say, he trains with the Kings/Reign MMA, which I mean having just a group of just not only good fighters but guys who have been in the big leagues. He's got I would say a more dynamic game, although based on what I've seen, I didn't get a good feel for his grappling, whether that's grappling, takedown defense or whatever. But just to make things interesting, I'm going to take Tickman here. Signs is favored. Looks like a high of -170 to a low of -155. It's not too bad of a spread, though. Tickman's at
Yeah.
+130, +135-ish.
Only other thing I would note is that Signs is formerly, because it doesn't exist anymore, but a Lions Den fighter.
Is he really? No
Yeah,
shit.
in the modern day and age.
That's the thing of beauty. We were just talking about the Lions Den on the whatever train wreck I did with Eugene and Nate the other week. All right, so let's move on here. And to me, this is actually a really interesting fight. Smilin' Sam Alvey versus Tom Watson. I'm just going to set this one up a little bit because when Alvey first debuted in Bellator, I was really, really impressed with the kid. He was just coming off a win over Jason Guida. I believe it was a split. And then he fought Carl Amasu, who is a killer. Doesn't always beat. You can't say he's an elite fighter, but his skill set is elite. And man, Smiling Sam beat him. I think I scored it a draw, but he really surprised me. Really crafty sweeps, and then I believe he was on the Ultimate Fighter, Sam Alvey, maybe 16. And then went and did a tour in MFC, and either way, that's kind of a surprising pick for me, but I really like it. Connor, why don't you go first on this one? Sam Alvey, Tom Watson.
This is a fun fight to me. I think this is another one that I'm bummed out that I'm missing. I mean, I guess I can't just lament the continued existence of Fox Sports 2 as a channel enough, but I just wish I could see some of these fights. This is like a, I don't know. This one has the potential to be a really lame fight, and it has the potential to be a really fun fight between two guys who I consider to be tough journeymen. Correct me if I'm wrong. The term journeyman is not necessarily insulting, is it? Because it's a term that I often use endearingly.
No,
Not as long as you. I always say that. Like gatekeeper, journeyman, I don't think it is, but I always point out that I don't mean it in an offensive way at all.
Like a lot of my favorite fighters are guys that I consider to be journeymen, guys who often win unexpectedly against top prospects, things like that. They're tough because they're veterans and they
We should just think of a new. We should coin a new phrase: "well-traveled warrior" or something cheesy. That's not funny.
Yeah, something catchy like
Yeah,
that, Dallas.
funny. You know what I'm saying. But either way, I get what you're saying. Point noted. You're not trying to insult him.
But anyway, I kind of like Alvey here. I don't want to get too much into this. We should get into the more interesting matchups, which start happening right after this. But I like Alvey here. I think Alvey is a very well-rounded guy. And the problem with Tom Watson is that he's got like MMA boxing that is completely hit or miss. Sometimes when he's against somebody who doesn't know how to strike, it looks pretty solid. But other times it's like he's just like a lot of MMA strikers. He's just missing those fundamentals, so he doesn't really like understand his range a lot of the times. The way that he was getting lit up at times by Talis Leitis is not really a good sign. And Leitis has improved his striking a lot in recent years, but still, I mean, Watson was billed as the sprawl and brawler in that fight, and he was getting hit because it didn't look like he just had no idea how to even fight a southpaw.
Yeah, so when you're the striker in a striker versus grappler matchup and you get outstruck, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, and it's not even like Leitis was striking him off the threat of a takedown or anything. He was just basically hitting him. He was just standing in front of him and hitting him. And so I kind of think we may be seeing the start of Watson's decline, whereas Alvey is one of those guys who I think will probably hang around at like the mid-level of the sport for a while, and he has already. He basically only loses to solid fighters in competitive fights, and he beats a lot of guys that people don't expect him to beat. He's the guy that I consider to be, a solid journeyman. He's the guy who will continue to surprise people by beating prospects even when he's not the favorite. So I'm hoping this is a good fight between two tough guys. Unfortunately for Tom Watson, it may be his last fight in the UFC. They seem to be cutting guys once again. But you know what? I think that I don't want to get in trouble with gyms, especially with people that I don't know. But I think Watson once again is indicative of the style of striking we see from Jackson Winklejohn fighters, where even if he looks decent and he understands setups and things like that, he doesn't have the understanding of basic fundamentals to make it work. So, and when I'm talking about fundamentals, I'm not talking about technique things. I'm talking about like balance and leverage and distance, things that you have to understand to make your basic techniques work. And Watson doesn't always have those things. And a lot of Jackson Winklejohn guys are the same. They throw themselves off balance to land big shots. They may understand how to go body head, but they don't understand how to make that shot to the body or head land in the first place. It's like, I don't know. They have this, it's very much MMA striking, like lots of spinning shit and not a jab in sight. So,
well, yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
Should we take your advice, Connor, and move on to the more interesting fights before you insult more gyms and fighters and fight?
I mean, I'm sorry about that.
No, I'm just fucking with you. Before I turn it over to Zane,
myself.
I just want to say I'm going to pick Alvey in this one too, in case Zane picked him, and then I'm accused of like being a bandwagon hopper. So Zane, go ahead.
He's not here. He's not here to randomly.
Speaking of, so we mentioned the Lions Den. Speaking of classic shit, Alvey is Team Quest.
Yeah, there are a few Team Quest guys lingering around out there. A lot of them were on World Series of Fighting's most recent show. But Yeah, I'm going Alvey too, and I mean more to the point for me, a big thing I've always kind of keyed in on with Watson is that he is literally a one-sided fighter. If you watch him when he is fighting, everything comes from his right side. Everything. All of his hard knees, all of his hard punches, all of his hard elbows. He really only fights with the right side of his body. And at some point, for a guy who's willing to take two shots to land one and is all of his offense is coming from very predictable angles, it only kind of makes sense that the longer he sticks around, the more prominent fights he gets, the easier time fighters gonna have breaking him down. The only thing I will say is I do think he beat Nick Catone, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
So um,
But
this
it's
could
not
end
like,
up being a really sloppy scrap.
and it's not like either Catone or Watson looked good in that fight. It was a
No,
really
no, they
dull
did.
fight.
It was just that Catone did absolutely nothing with at any point to generate any offense of any sort.
Has Watson had any cardio issues?
No. Dude is easily able to go for 15 minutes while throwing. That is, I think, one of his biggest things is that he's just one of those unstop. As long as you're not knocking him out, he will just like keep chugging forward, forward, forward.
Well, the weird thing is I'd still give that advantage to Alvey because he's actually fought in some 5 rounders lately and was still throwing hands hard in rounds 4 and 5. So, and the
Watson's
other
had a
thing,
couple.
5 rounders? It's been a
Yep.
while though. I mean, just
Yeah,
because he's been in that.
2010.
And I was only bringing that up because I knew that was an advantage for or a strong point for Alvey, and I didn't have any recollection of Watson. But to me, the other thing is, I mean, Alvey's a really capable grappler, and he's crafty as hell about it too. He's not the kind that's going to shoot a double leg from 10 feet away. I mean, he'll throw hands and move into the clinch, and he's got a pretty crafty set of trips and throws or whatever. So kind of interesting. We're all unanimous on that one. I wondered if I was going to be the only one, but we're all going Alvey. Actually, the betting lines are pretty tight on this one. Alvey's the underdog, but just barely over 100, plus 110, actually plus 105, ranging up to plus 115, whereas Watson is about minus 30 to minus one, or I'm sorry, minus 130 to minus 140.
I think here's a good way to summarize the matchup. I think that Zane said that Watson is a one-sided fighter. I think to even go past that, Watson is a keep doing it until it works fighter, where he basically has like one approach to fighting and he just keeps doing it. So Dallas, you often say, the fighters should ask themselves, what are they doing at this point in the fight to win? For Watson, that's never a question that's asked. He's always doing the same thing he was doing in round one, and if it's working, it's working, and if not, he's losing, or winning controversial decisions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Alvey is not that guy. I think Alvey's pretty crafty and experienced. Watson is a guy who will always be a tough test, but a test, he's a known quantity, and I think probably will be that way for the rest of his career. Alvey always has the potential to surprise both people watching the fights and his opponents. So
I'm kind of honored that made an impression on you. I'm actually being serious right now because I think that's the second time you brought that up.
I think of that to myself all the time. I've probably mentioned it on my podcast. That thing that I used to do that I haven't done in weeks. That I mention that all the time though, because once you said that to me, every time I'm watching a fight now, I'm thinking, what is this guy doing? Why is he? He hasn't changed his approach. He hasn't made an adjustment.
Well, and that's legitimate because to me, MMA in a fight, and it's weird, I have all these correlations kind of like what Kareem mentioned, but between tennis, but tennis is all about adjustments, and MMA is the same way. You constantly have to be making little adjustments because your opponent is, if he's not, he should be. So to me, that's the difference between a strategy and live fight IQ because one's pre-planned, up on the drawing board, but to me, it's just as important what kind of little tweaks you can make when someone's coming after you.
You need strategy and you also need tactics. And a lot of guys, even if they come in with a game plan, they don't have tactics. They can't make their adjustments to account for the reality of the fight.
And of course, there are a lot of guys, too, that think that they can do it all on the fly and end up kind of lost because they can't keep up.
Yeah.
Word. All right, we're going to move on to the ladies' bantamweight. Sarah McMahon just coming off a pretty brutal loss, but it's to Ronda Rousey, so it's a respectably brutal loss.
Mm-hmm.
Former Olympic silver medalist in freestyle wrestling, taking on a newcomer in Lauren Murphy. Although she's a newcomer, she's got a pretty solid list of scalps she's taken recently. Although, of
Yep.
course, there's a big asterisk by Miriam Nakamoto's name. But in her last, I don't know how many group of wins, she has Caitlin Young, Sarah D'Alelio, and Miriam Nakamoto. Even though Nakamoto, who's a killer, that was due to a knee injury. It wasn't like she came out and styled on the chick and ouch, I hurt my knee. I mean, Murphy showed amazing heart, big heart to stand, to take everything that Nakamoto was throwing and still be coming after her. So not just your standard run-of-the-mill newcomer. If any fans out there haven't heard of Lauren Murphy, Zane, I think it's your turn here. Break it
Uh,
down.
yeah, I mean, I always hate when fans okay, unless it's like Varner versus who did he fight where he broke his ankle last time? Just uh
I don't
God,
remember.
who
Oh,
was that?
he fought. I'll look it up for you. New
All
guy.
right.
He's a new guy, young guy.
The
Yeah,
internet's
newish, not that young. He fought in the WEC back in the day.
He's one of
Uh,
those. He's an Eric Silva. He looks young.
yeah,
James
uh,
Krause. James Krause.
James Krause, yeah. Unless it's the sort of situation like Jamie Varner fighting James Krause, where he's jumping around early in like the first few seconds of a fight, and the ankle just snaps, and you're just like, oh god, that. I always hate when people are like, oh well, asterisk, it was an injury. I mean, Lauren Murphy stayed in that fight and kept trying to take Nakamoto down to the point that Nakamoto blew out her knee. I mean, that's a legit problem. That's legitimately getting hurt while because you're defending your opponent's offense. That's as much a product of what your opponent is doing as it is you just getting injured. It's the same thing with like the Condit Woodley thing, where people are like, oh well, Condit. It's like yeah, because kept getting taken down, and when you get taken down like that, you blow out getting your knee injured is kind of the result. And so I give Murphy at least the credit that she was able to not get totally shit kicked by Miriam Nakamoto and to hang tough in there and to stick to her game plan to the point that she was able to wear Nakamoto down and get her hurt. So unfortunate, and I'm also, I know she just recently moved to the MMA lab down in Arizona, and while that's not my favorite gym in the fight world, it's a big step up from where she was, and it's the kind of step that Sarah McMahon has not taken in her training thus far. I don't know that it'll be enough here because unfortunately Murphy's been a pretty incredibly robotic striker thus far in her career, and her real strengths are in having a takedown game and a really controlling top jiu-jitsu game. And unfortunately, I just can't see her getting that going against McMahon at all, who's looked much more developed lately in her striking. And I think Murphy's a legit top 5 or so. Bantamweight, I would probably pick her to beat Misha Tate right now, and maybe even Alexis Davis. But Sarah McMahon is a poisonous matchup.
High praise.
Mm-hmm.
Connor, what do you think?
Very well said, Zane. I more or less agree with everything you said. I think that Murphy is one of those. Murphy is like classic MMA, and Sarah McMahon is like classic wrestle boxer. They're two very archetypal fighters.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Murphy's all about the one thing that Murphy does well that a lot of fighters still don't get. And I'm thinking about this. It's on the brain lately because I've been watching a lot of ground and pound stuff. But she has good positions for strikes on the ground. She's got very good MMA oriented jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got good MMA fundamentals, but she does not have the wrestling built athleticism that makes McMahon so talented. And the thing is, unfortunately, I'm not sure why this is. It seems to be the case with female fighters. I don't want to upset people here, but tend to have a lot of pushing punches and robotic punches. And some people have said, oh, maybe women just can't throw as hard as men. But there are tons of knockout artists in female boxing. So for some reason, the women just aren't striking to the same level that men are in MMA. I'm not sure why that is, but Murphy has that same kind of very robotic. Everything is like being pushed to the target, Whereas McMahon throws punches like she's throwing a fastball. You know what I mean? Like she's really throwing her fist at the opponent. She's got the explosiveness, the sling you need for a good punch, whereas Murphy's just kind of prodding away.
I think for a lot of it, that may be that a lot of women don't come from very good, well-developed camps in MMA. They come from really small, nothing camps, and so they can learn.
In training them.
Yeah, they can find some people who are maybe a good jiu-jitsu instructor, maybe a good wrestling instructor, maybe just a good general MMA instructor, but top striking instructors are still rare in MMA. I mean,
all right, I've had enough of your misogynist propaganda between you two.
That's a good point. I mean, I agree with Zane wholly on where Lauren Murphy stands right now. I think she's easily a top bantamweight fighter. I think she's been really impressive. But I think that stylistically, this is a really rough matchup for her because I can't imagine her working her specialty on McMahon, and she definitely can't outstrike McMahon because even if she can hit McMahon, she's a better combination puncher than McMahon. But really, all that means is that she throws combinations and McMahon doesn't, and McMahon doesn't need combinations to knock you down and hurt you, and she's always got her wrestling to fall back on. So.
Yeah, I mean, McMahon's an Olympic wrestler, so she's not going to be able to stop that takedown, which means you knock her out before she takes you down, or you sub her off her back, and both of those options are highly unlikely. Yeah.
I mean, Murphy could potentially sweep or escape from the bottom. I mean, her best chance would be to try to get to the top once it goes to the ground and make McMahon uncomfortable. But the thing is, like, I just think McMahon has the strength to, and not just pure strength, like wrestling strength, like the understanding of how to apply the immense strength that she has.
Oh, her base from her top game is like a naval battleship.
Yeah. McMahon is, I mean, look at her build, dude. She's built like two swimmers fused together. She has an incredibly powerful back. She looks like her back looks like Jack Dempsey. You know what I mean? She's built. And Murphy just doesn't have the athleticism, which is, once again, we don't have. It's early in women's MMA. We're seeing the same thing we saw early in men's MMA. They just don't. They're not at the big camps. They don't have the training partners. So we see a lot of women who have come from like competitive jiu-jitsu backgrounds and everything, but don't have just the raw strength and athletic ability you need to compete at high level MMA. Whereas McMahon does have that. She's like the Ricardo Arona or something of her day, where she really has that strength and that power necessary.
I honestly do think that Murphy is like one of the top 5 to 6 athletes in her division, like purely athletically. But it's also like she came to MMA so late that she's super raw. I mean, she came to any combat sport so late that her whole like athletic development from that like combat sports perspective is just really raw. She is fast. I mean, she's surprisingly fast and strong for her division. I think that's something that gets overlooked because she is kind of a raw fighter.
But I think everything about her style is attritive. I mean, she's fast and strong in the sense that she can like pin you, hold you down, grind against you, wear you down with strikes. Like McMahon, she doesn't have explosive power the way that McMahon does.
Well, not explosive.
She lacks fluidity, I think.
Yeah, she lacks fluidity. I mean, I think she's actually pretty like fast when it comes to how quickly she actually throws her hands and like getting her strikes out there faster than like her fight with Sarah D'Alelio was like, oh my god, D'Alelio is really way slower than Murphy.
D'Alelio was getting beaten up by Murphy too. I recall that fight, and D'Alelio is no joke to be dominating a fighter like that.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, for however many years she has in, she's obviously honed her jiu-jitsu game and other things, and striking is one of those things that even if I think we can even get away with saying, like, Ronda Rousey's striking was, not up until recently. When she first came on, I think her striking was noticeably clunky.
Ronda Rousey's striking was bad until, like, 8 months ago. It was okay, and just recently it's, like, turned a major corner.
And so look at who, her camp, how long she's been training. So either way, Lauren Murphy, we're not being hard on you. You're facing Olympian. That's a tough task. So everyone's picking McMahon, yeah?
Yep.
All right, betting odds on this one, McMahon is the biggest favorite on the card at minus 320 all the way up to minus 350. Lauren Murphy comes in as a serious underdog at plus 250, ranging up to 285. Now we're going to move on to the final fight. And this that we've been discussing is the Fox Sports 2 preliminary card, which starts at 8 p.m. Eastern. This is going to be a hell of a scrap. Jussier da Silva, a.k.a. Formiga, versus Zach Makovsky. Connor, I know you're chomping at the bit to talk about this one, so go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm super high on Makovsky ever since he came to the UFC. I really, really am. I think he's one of those guys who I'm just really, really glad he just made the decision to go to flyweight, because I just think he's just incredibly well suited for it. His speed, and now he's got more strength to go along with it, and he's coming along as a technical fighter in every way. And I actually got to interview him a while back, and I just like his mentality. He's one of those guys who actually watches footage and tries to pick up things from fighters that he admires. So I compared some of his striking to Machida, and he was super flattered because Machida's one of those guys who he said he likes to pull tricks from and see how he makes his left straight land, as a fellow southpaw. So, I'm high on Makovsky. I lament the fact that he's on the prelims on a channel nobody will see, because he's almost certainly the next title challenger for Demetrius Johnson if he wins this fight. I think he's easy, and I think that Jussier da Silva is a fighter that you could quite viably win a title shot off of beating. I think that's a guy that is a proven top fighter, even if he has had kind of a rough run recently. I don't know. I'm too bummed about the fact that this is on the prelims to even give much of an in-depth breakdown about it. It's just Makovsky's more of an MMA fighter, and that's really the long and the short of it. Da Silva's a guy who doesn't have the fluidity, which is the hallmark of Makovsky's game. I mean, if anything stands out about Makovsky, it's how well he combines every aspect of the fight into one thing. He's hitting while he's passing. He's punching you when he's threatening you with the takedown. He's taking you down. He's incredible in the scrambles. He's just a really fun fighter to watch for people who are into not just pure striking or grappling technique, but who are into fundamental MMA, because his transition game is top notch. It's one of the best out there. So whereas Formiga's kind of unfortunately part of a dying generation, I think, of fighters, where you need to be good at everything, and he's just not. He's pretty decent, but he can't blend it together. He never seems to be fighting in every phase at once the way that Makovsky almost always is.
Yeah.
I think this is actually a pretty easy Makovsky pick for me. I think it'll probably be, I guess, a Makovsky decision, and it could be a Makovsky knockout. I don't think that's impossible to see coming.
Zane?
Just can't hang with him.
I mostly agree. I think the only big danger really is the fact that Makovsky hasn't shown any finishing tools throughout his career. He had a submission. He's had a run of submissions when he was facing some really poor competition. Against poor competition, he's been a great submission fighter, but against every upper division fight he's had, he's gone to decision, and that's that would be my one area of fear, would be that if he's really just going to get into a big, long, scramble-filled fight with Formiga, he could end up getting caught in something. But in truth, like Connor says, I mean, he's better at shifting phases, he's better at shifting gears. I do think Formiga actually looked much better against Scott Jorgensen than he's looked at any point prior in his UFC career. I thought he was outstriking Jorgensen pretty handily before he headbutted him to the ground. So I think that Formiga's getting better with that, but I don't think he still can hit the transition switches and really put that together. And I don't think he's a better striker than Makovsky. I think that was also kind of indicative of how Jorgensen's slowly kind of tapering off and sliding down the ranks. So I expect this to be interesting and competitive, and I hope it is filled with a lot of really fun scrambles and fantastic action. But I expect Makovsky to come out of all the exchanges just a couple steps ahead.
Can Can I ask what is Nova União Kimura? Is that like the
It's
squire to Nova União's
it,
Fender? Is that what that
it's
is?
just a different branch, smaller branch in a different part of Brazil.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like the less impressive Nova União.
Well,
Hmm.
it's not the one that Pederneiras runs or whatever, you know what I
Right.
mean? So it's a less prominent satellite school. A lot of
Yeah.
cats have been coming out of there. They're still doing well. I mean, Nova Nile in all is a factory right now for prospects and for currently standing talent.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Let
think
me
who was it that just got signed out of Novo Nakamura. Somebody just got picked up, and I'm trying to remember who it was.
I remember it vaguely. We got to move on, but let me throw something at you right here because Formiga is, kind of known as fairly one-dimensional. He's a judoka. His striking is not a lot to write home. It's kind of like the old Diego Sanchez thing. Well, he'll come at you with so much ferocity that your tendency is either to run away or to hold your ground and cover, and then he just glues himself onto you. And the guy is just a ridiculous submission grappler. I mean, he teleports to back control. He's amazing in transitions. You could argue he's got some of the best grappling transitions in the flyweight weight class in the world. So, and the reason I don't know if you guys saw when Connor was doing his thing, my jaw dropped because Makovsky's a minus 320 favorite. I was kind of leaning his way, but those odds are so ridiculous. I'm tempted to pick Formiga. So let me finish this off. I agree with everything you guys said about Makovsky, but I guess his striking has been good. He's always been a super technical guard passer, excellent top game, really crafty grappler. But his striking has come along, but is it good enough to win a fight? Because if it's not, he's going to be tangled up with Formiga, who I'm not saying Makovsky can't handle that, but that's, Formiga's kind of a one-dimensional, or let's say he has a limited skill set, but that limited skill set has been phenomenal enough to keep him in the anywhere between the top 5 to the top 10 in the flyweight world rankings. Are you sure Makovsky, without his finishing power, can tangle up with him for 3 rounds and or keep him at bay with his strikes and sprawl and brawl?
I
Yes.
I think actually I think that that's a flawed way of looking at the fight. I think that's exactly the kind of view that allows Makovsky to win because it's not if Makovsky can't strike with him, can he do this? If Makovsky can't grapple with him, can he strike with him? Makovsky has an endless array of options because of the way that he views and trains fighting. Every aspect of fighting is there as an option to him all the time. So it's not the striking's going to work because the grappling works. The grappling's going to work because the striking works. The in-between portions where where one becomes the other are what makes the entire game effective. Where De Silva, Formiga is a potent fighter, and his ground game is phenomenal. But the big difference I see between these two is that Formiga's grappling or he's striking, or it's he's doing one or the other, and there's like a switch that goes off in his brain. Makovsky is just doing all those things all the time.
I actually
And
think
so
he's always grappling when he's running on
Yeah.
his feet toward swinging his hands. That's his entryway into grappling, pretty
yeah,
much.
Yeah.
whereas Makovsky doesn't seem to have a favorite face. You know what I
This is
mean?
true. Yeah.
Makovsky doesn't have a thing that he likes to do best. There's no thing where you look at him and you're like, okay, this is where he's most comfortable. Makovsky looks eminently comfortable in just about every phase of the fight, which is what makes him such a dangerous guy to face.
I guess I'm not so sold on his striking yet. I mean, I was blown away he's shown it, but are we sure now that he's that reliable against top-level opponents on the feet? And then, my other one is I'm not so sure he can out-grapple Formiga. If he takes him down, I
This
guess
was
I'm just not so confident in that.
my response to that would be the Chris Carriasso fight for Formiga, in
Yeah,
which
Carriaso's a weirdo.
Formiga
Real up and
was
down.
able to positionally get in on Carriasso for 2 rounds and then just took an utter shit kicking in the third. And it was one of those fights where it was like, Formiga might have won it, but it was clear who the better fighter was by the end of it, and it was not Jussier Formiga, and that would be, or Jussier Formiga, and that would be my fear going in, is that when he fights somebody that's really, really competent and athletic and well versed, his grappling is good, but he's not such a monster that he's just gonna like get in there and link something up and it's like, oh, that's over. It's
Like he
more
did
like
against Pac-10 champion Scott Jorgensen.
like he headbutted Scott Jorgensen to the ground and then got I mean, that was very much the result of Jorgensen being being almost out as he was on the way down.
Honestly, I think that despite the fact that Formiga is the one who had the finish, I think if we're looking at two guys who have had fights against whatever incarnation of Scott Jorgensen we're currently witnessing, I think that Makovsky has the better claim for being completely dominant. Because if
Yeah, that would
Makovsky,
be my
yeah,
feeling too.
I
because
got you.
there's an asterisk on Formiga's win over Jorgensen, whereas Jorgensen was utterly and completely dominated by Makovsky. I mean, he had some moments in the wrestling, but the thing is like Jorgensen would hit a great sweep on Makovsky, and he would instantly be working to improve position and reverse him. And it's just his whole style can be summed up by the word flow. Everything flows from one phase to the next, or from one technique to the next. There's always Archie Moore talked about his fighting style in a Sports Illustrated interview from the 40s. And he said that he's always trying to build bridges when he fights. That everything he does has always got to be a bridge to escape or to go to another attack. So when I throw a right hand, there's a left hook out of there, or I can roll out, or I can block. Everything, there's always a bridge for me to cross over from whatever location I end up in. And that's what I see when I see Makovsky fighting. He's always got a route from one place to the next. Now, Formiga could submit him.
Yeah.
That's not really a thing. I'd be surprised, but it's not like it's something that I'm discounting. So I see Dallas seems to be arguing basically in fairness that yes, Formiga is a top flyweight and his single skill set is good enough to catch somebody. But I think that this is a pretty clear like 70-30. This is Makovsky's fight by a relatively dominant decision, where he's maybe in trouble in a few grappling spots, but he just has such a good understanding of how to get back to the position he wants to be in, because he's never really uncomfortable. He's never really like feeling, oh God, I can't end up in this place against this person. He always knows what to do from whatever position he gets put in.
All right, so we got to move on. We've been prattling for an hour and we're barely halfway through the card, but I'm going to take Formiga here. I don't want to launch back into it because I feel like it'll be unfair. I won't let you guys respond, but well, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm going to say something and you guys are then going to, which is good. It's the idea, but we just got to move along here. But
It's cool. Let's keep going.
Makovsky's more well-rounded, but I think if Formiga is able to put him in his one dimension, he's not just going to be able to get out or go back to where he's comfortable. So, and the odds on this one are strongly Makovsky, and this is shocking to me, regardless if whatever, minus 320 are okay, a low of minus 285 to a high of minus 320 in Formiga. This is definitely worth a look for chance bettors out there. Plus 260, plus 220, so right around plus 220 to plus 260. All right, we're moving on to the main card here. First fight on, this is Fox Sports 1, 10 o'clock Eastern. In the PM, Robbie Peralta versus Thiago Tavares. In Tavares, longtime UFC lightweight. This will be his featherweight debut. Zane, your turn.
This is a classic Robbie Peralta trap, or Thiago Tavares trap fight, rather. This is exactly the kind of fight that he loses for seemingly no reason that I can account for. It's exactly the kind of like, I'm getting hyped, a little bit hyped on Thiago Tavares again. Oh man, he's showing all these great skills, and I feel like he's just gonna walk out there and get the doors blown off him. And the thing is that, and Peralta's exactly the kind of fighter that's done that to everyone in his UFC run. You know, Kir Khorasani beat him, but otherwise he's had this great. I mean, the thing is that he's legitimately probably one of the top athletes at 145.
He's one of the meanest too,
and one of the less polished fighters at 145. So people look at him and they're like, oh well, he charges forward, winging these huge, ridiculous, sloppy punches. He doesn't really wrestle all that well. And yet he's beating guys because he really is a quality athlete. He's fast, he can take a shot, and he hits hard, and he's actually got a fairly polished jiu-jitsu game that he kind of pulls out whenever it hits the ground. And Tavares is exactly the kind of fighter that just seems to, he gets caught by guys who he doesn't expect to be able to catch him a lot of times. I mean, he schooled Justin Salas, and that Justin Salas has gone like, I don't know. Justin Salas has had some problems looking like a quality fighter of late. Um,
Shane Roller, I assume, is the good example
Shane
you're looking
Roller
for.
is a great example of that. I mean, and he got knocked out by Matt Wyman. I mean, he has these moments that he just kind of gets shut off, and I think Peralta's probably gonna be the next case of that. So I'm picking Peralta to stay scrambling on the ground and to give Tavares a hard fight there, and then when it's standing, to crack him eventually on a chin that is proved suspect.
Connor, agree, disagree?
I agree, and I'm kind of bummed about it because Robbie Peralta is a fighter who, this is going to sound needlessly harsh, but I have no interest in Robbie Peralta as a fighter. It's just like a guy who's never going to be technical and shows no interest in being technical. And one of his fights, well, let's see, which was it? A couple fights ago. I mean, Robbie Peralta's in the UFC, and he got put on the bottom by Esteban Payan and didn't know how to get up from side control. Like, he didn't know. He had no idea. He had no route of escape. He didn't know he wasn't bridging his hips. He was just like holding on and waiting for the next round. It's just, Robbie Peralta's a guy who consistently, like Tom Watson, except more effective with it, is always doing the same exact thing. And oftentimes it works because all it takes is one shot with somebody like Peralta. But it's just uninteresting. It's just boring to me. I don't want to see a guy who's just going to like stand and wang and try to knock the other guy out at all costs. With no attention to technique or strategy, like just keep throwing the right hand until it lands or until the final bell rings. I don't know. But he's probably going to beat Tavares, like Zane said. So there's that. This should be a prelim.
All right, so I actually love Robbie Peralta. He's really grown on me, and to me, it's nice because we all get off on, we just spent however long talking about little, finesse details, aesthetics. I like having a cat like Robbie Peralta, and you can bet this is UFC level. All of his opponents have studied, and wow, this motherfucker puts his head down and throws punches until my head is going to be in the fifth row. It's not, coincidence or luck that he's been able to make it this far by doing that. So I kind of like that. He's a dude who puts technique and finesse. To me, he's the kind of guy who's a fighter, like in the Matt Brown sense, and that I think fighters, when they come up in their career and even in a fight, it's that bridge between learning technique and the right way to do it and remembering this is a fucking fight. People are throwing hard. Robbie Peralta's maxed out on that side. I thought I was going to be the only one to pick him here, but I also think he's going to win. I think he's going to be in deep, deep shit if Thiago can get the takedown. But the way I look at it is Thiago was always almost a tiny lightweight, in the way he persevered was blinding speed. Well, now by dropping down, that speed is going to be somewhat diluted, so I think it's going to be harder for him to implement that game. If he can get inside and adhere himself to Robbie, I think that it's going to be a tough fight. I think he can ride out a decision or submit him. Other than that, I think Peralta is going to be too mean for him.
And also the prospect of weakening one's chin by cutting weight and then fighting Robbie Peralta is not it's not heartening. You know what I mean? The guy who hits as hard as Robbie Peralta against what might be a slightly dehydrated version of Thiago Tavares.
Yeah.
And he used to pack on a lot of muscle, right? I mean, he was like a little square-shaped lightweight. So it's kind of interesting. We all agree on that he's the unanimous underdog. Tavares is favored anywhere from minus 165 to 180. Peralta's the underdog, pretty much an average of 155, plus 155. We're going to move on to the heavyweights now. To me, this was kind of interesting. It was on the card. I like Sean Jordan, but they've paired him up with 6'8" heavyweight kickboxer Jack May. Whose turn is it to go first this time?
Connor.
Zane?
Connor. Zane.
You want me to take this one first?
Fuck you guys. I'll go first just
Okay.
with a quick one because I always want to sneak in some 2 cents here. I was actually surprised. Did you guys know that Jack May is a CSW guy, a Paulson guy?
No.
Yeah, I
Didn't know
did.
that.
That's how Sherdog lists him. And that actually, anytime you put Eric Paulson's name in vague association with someone, my respect for him goes up. This guy's pretty athletic for a 6'8" guy. pretty good kickboxer, and he's a mean dude. At any point in time, if transitions do transpire in his fight, he's not afraid to break up those transitions by punching people right in the face. He's the kind of guy that can beat a lot of people because he's big, he can move well, and he knows how to strike. To me, Sean Jordan is, an unbelievable athlete. I don't remember what it was, but he ran, his 40-yard dash time was obscene. Super, super athletic, big boy, really good boxer. I think obviously the size and the range are going to be a little bit of a problem, but my point is I'm going to take Sean Jordan here. I have to go get my charger, so you guys go ahead and commence with the show. I will return
All right.
expeditiously.
So, yeah, this is a fight that I would definitely rather see on the prelims, even though somebody's probably going out. Just because, man, if there were two heavyweights in the UFC right now that I am not excited by, it's Sean Jordan and Jack May. And the thing is, Jack May actually is a pretty decent technical, like not technical, he's heavyweight technical kickboxer. Like, he's got a little spring in his step. He throws combinations nicely. He can actually get his leg up there to throw a head kick every now and then. But he's a one-round fighter. I mean, he is the definition of a one-round heavyweight. He's maybe even less than a one-round heavyweight. I mean, the only K1 kickboxing bout I've ever seen of him, he basically got knocked out because he got tired in the first round of a kickboxing bout.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But Sean Jordan, he could easily knock Sean Jordan out in the first minute of the first round. I mean, Sean Jordan is by no stretch of anyone's imagination a great boxer, even though Dallas tried to build him as one. So,
he's got good boxing for heavyweight MMA. I mean, I know what Dallas is saying. He throws combinations of punches. He understands what an uppercut is. He has things that are not overhands.
He got, you saw that fight with Matt Mitrione, right? That was class was in session and Matt Mitrione was the teacher. And how often can you say that?
Yeah. So Jordan's the guy who I think he has evident athleticism, but he hasn't developed any kind of game with it really. He's just kind of in there and doing his thing, and if he's just, kind of like Matt Mitrione in some ways, except Mitrione's actually shown a little bit of development, technically speaking. He's like
Mitrione's actually put something together.
Yeah. Mitrione has Jordan. Let's look at it this way. Sean Jordan's 21 fights into his MMA career. He's doing the same thing he was doing 7, 8. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. Usually, when it doesn't work, it's like a catastrophic failure. So I'm going to go ahead and say that Sean Jordan is and always will be a known quantity. I'm going to pick Jack May just because I'm hoping to see something different, not for any logical reason.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have heavyweights to be interested in. Even Soa Palele, even though he was kind of derailed recently.
Yeah.
Palele still was somebody that's okay, somebody at heavyweight who's kind of on a run, who's putting something together. Now we've got Alexei Oleinik, another heavyweight who's okay, this guy might be a mid-tier heavyweight in a year or two. So the fact that Jack May's under Eric Paulson, like Dallas said, that interests me. The fact that he's a really big heavyweight and that he might have some catch wrestling background developing since he's only 8 fights into his career, and the fact that he's got a kickboxing background, I hope we see something interesting. I hope that I was just about to say that I hope he gets on whatever Josh Burnett was on, so his cardio lasts longer. I guess I don't actually hope for that, but I would like to see. My ideal way that this fight plays out is Jack May goes in there, fun first round, and then stays competitive to a second round finish. Because all I want is to see him go more than 5 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be nice. For that reason, I'm picking Jordan just because I think that Jordan will probably survive the first round, and if he survives the first round, he's going to win the fight.
Yeah.
Do you guys think May can stop Jordan's takedown?
I don't think that Jordan's going to go to this takedown early.
He's fighting a 6'8" guy with a major range disadvantage who's a kickboxer, and he's going to strike with him?
Yeah, I think Jordan will try and strike with him for the first part of this fight.
I think he's going to throw an overhand left and get inside on his hips and take him down and either hold him there and beat the crap out of him or submit him.
That'd be nice.
I mean, he stood with Pat Barry. He stood with Matt Mitrione. He
Yeah, I
kind
kind
of
of
stands
assumed
with
that.
he kind
Did
of
he?
stands with people, or yeah, he kind of stands with them, or he holds them against the fence.
I
Yeah, I
thought
haven't seen a nearly consistent enough takedown game out of Sean Jordan to assume that he's going to default to that.
All right, the betting lines are pretty tight on this. Jordan is the favorite, but not by a ton. He's at -90 to a high of -205, and Jack May is at averaging right about +165, so a little closer than I expected. Maybe I'm underrating Mr. May. I apologize in advance if I am.
Well, I mean, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly as well, that his loss to Derek Lewis had as much to do with the fact that he like blew his knee out in the first couple minutes of that fight
Did he?
as
I don't
any.
remember that. That fight wasn't on Fight Pass. I couldn't find it anywhere to rewatch it.
Um, yeah.
So I
So,
watched
'cause,
some
I
of
mean,
his old
he
fights, and
was
he's just like this.
competitively scrambling with Lewis on the ground when Lewis got him to the ground, and then he slid off. He like injured his knee defending a takedown or something, slid off his back, and then Lewis just pounded him through the canvas because he's Derek Lewis.
Yeah, he's definitely not a fish out of water by any means. Not a one-dimensional guy. And like I said, he's really athletic for a 6'8" guy.
Yeah.
So that'll kind of be an interesting fight. This is another one. Moving on to the next one, unless you guys have anything more on that.
No.
Alan Juban versus Seth Baczynski. Not a terrible fight by any means. I'm just kind of surprised this one is getting such a high status. It's leading into the co-main event. Or I'm sorry, it's not. Damn, there's a lot of
No.
1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 fights on the main card. Interesting.
Yep.
So either way, Juban is. A lot of people thought he'd be destined for the UFC earlier. Interesting background. I believe kind of a hybrid training camp of Black House and 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu.
Mhm.
Talented cat for sure. Zane, start us off on this one.
All right. Yeah, he is a very like this is sort of a matchup of mirror images. It's just that Bakvinsky's been around longer, basically. I mean, Juban, for saying that we might have expected him to be in the UFC earlier, he hasn't been fighting for very long. I mean, I don't remember when he started, but it wasn't that many years ago for a guy in his early 30s. Um, but yeah, I mean, like neither of them are really range strikers. Juban's got a nice kicking game that he's a little better at range than Baksinski, I'd say. But where they really both excel is when they get into the clinch, both with dirty boxing and with knees and sort of a tie clinch kind of game. They're both willing to grapple from either top or bottom position and to a fault at times. But Baksinski's shown himself to be a much better grappler, and he's got a lot more experience against top-end competition. And he looked good against Thiago Alves, even in a loss. So I gotta think that he's just fighting at a higher, better developed level than Juban here, and that he can match him talent for talent pretty much everywhere.
So before I turn it over to Connor, just a real quick, I'm not sure if it's a clarification or not. I think SureDog listed him as Black House / 10th Planet, but his bio on UFC.com said he was a Sykes and Janjira Muay Thai guy. And also an interesting tidbit I wrote down from his bio on UFC.com, he hit 2 straight go-go platas in his AMI fights, which is that's some baller shit right there.
Yeah, well, the UFC.com profile is almost certainly correct because I believe they actually talk to these guys when they come in.
Except for under Sam Alvey, he beat Jason Guida, and they have that he owns a win over Clay Guida. So,
oh well, yeah, they're bad. I mean,
little.
with interview info, like they actually interview them and talk about like what their gym is and what they've done. It's a better place to go for interview information. No, I wouldn't use them for stats,
Yeah,
but
there's actual person-to-person communication.
Yeah.
Transpiring there. Connor the Rabbi, what do you think?
Am I still the rabbi? Oh.
Well,
that's a bummer. I don't know why.
You got the beard and the tie and the sweater, so
I guess I need to start working on the side locks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thought that the Melanson. Jesus Christ! You can for some reason the atmosphere has been sucked out of this show. It's like, does anyone feel like we're just trudging through these matchups?
Well, no offense, I love you guys, but this is why I always want to start at the end of the card because we're all full of piss and vinegar at the beginning, and we spend 20 minutes talking about fights no one gives a fuck about, and now we're at the part where people care about these, and we're all burned out. Like fuck, I've been sitting here for 2 hours. Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm happy,
Okay.
but yay, whatever. Whatever.
Yep.
I,
Zane gets a gold star.
You guys
I'm
are done.
glad. I'm glad I'm not the only person who thought Bashinsky was competitive with Alves because it's a strange dichotomy because he was dominated by Alves, but he was competitively dominated. Like
Yeah.
at no point did it look like there was no hope for him. He consistently landed good strikes on Alves, and was defending things. I like Bashinsky a lot. I think that he's a fighter that I will always. I hope he always has a job in the UFC because he's very fun to watch. And he's once again like that journeyman kind of guy. He's kind of like a Joe Lozon type of fighter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where his skill set is that he's dangerous because he goes for incredibly risky things all the time. Whether it's standing on the feet and going for strikes or throwing up crazy submissions, he's content to play guard or to throw knees in the clinch and it's just whatever. And I think he's actually pretty technical. He's the kind of guy who just seems to have mental lapses every now and then where he just doesn't have sometimes he lacks confidence, I think, when he's fighting, and that tends to be when he loses, when he doesn't feel like he's winning.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got a whole bag of tricks. He's just a cagey veteran type of guy, and and Jabon lost to Mike Rhodes not that long ago, and while Mike Rhodes is a hot prospect, he's already basically proven to not quite be ready for the UFC yet.
Yeah.
Whereas Bashinsky is eminently capable of hanging in the mid-tier UFC welterweight division. So I'm going Bashinsky here. He's a veteran. He's had a rough streak lately, but he hung with Thiago Alves, and that looked like classic Thiago Alves. So hanging with the kind of Alves that fought GSP is impressive to me.
And he did beat Neil Magny at the start of Neil Magny's streak. I mean, that was
Yeah.
a fight in which
He finished Matt Brown in the clinch, and Matt Brown
Well,
is now known for the most perilous and fearsome clinch around. And Baczynski not only hung with him there, but finished him there. So to get my criticisms out of the way, Connor, what you were saying, my little whatever that is theme about fighters should ask themselves at certain times, what am I doing to win? I think I might have gotten that from Baczynski because he's a tall dude, 6'3", and he's not just 6'3", he is gangly as shit, long arms, real thin. He's almost got like a John Jones-esque build.
Yeah.
And he tends to stand at the proper range if he was a range striker, but range striking seems to be the one really cumbersome aspect of his game. And that's fine, but it seems if that's the case, then I wouldn't stand at range and try to trade with people. And so to me, that's my one knock on Baczynski's game. I think he's been underrated since day one. I'm going from memory here, which is scary, but I believe he fought Brad Tavares on The Ultimate Fighter and was DQ'd for a soccer kick, left the show. I think he did really well. They came back and had him fight Tavares again, and he lost. And again, I don't have his record of the timeline, but I think then he was released. Now we're seeing that Brad Tavares is a tough motherfucker. So there's no shame in that at all. And now you look at the way he performed against Matt Brown, Magny. Dude's legit. To me, he's a long to me, wrestlers, I don't know if anyone has ever wrestled, but you always think of like the Chad Mendez build for a wrestler or Daniel Cormier. Some of the most frustrating guys to wrestle are long, wispy, skinny dudes who are really technical and athletic. Baczynski's that kind of guy. I think the key to his game is his tie clinch, and I'm specifically saying tie clinch, knowing that some people mistakenly, anytime you wrap one head, single or double collar tie or necktie, that's not always the tie clinch. Baczynski has really done well with both single and double neckties, but his tie clinch, where he cups his hand behind, pulls the head down, is how he takes fights over. Just like a wrestler would take someone down, get in top control to control the pace, the location, all that shit. Baczynski is devastating in the clinch. I think it's a little bit of MMA math that we've all kind of used. Juban, I'm really excited to see him. He's got a real interesting skill set. Electric striking and kickboxing, striking and jiu-jitsu. So a lot of weapons standing and on the feet. but I don't think it's going to be enough to take Basinski, especially if he starts to impose himself either in the clinch or with takedowns. So I'm going to go with Basinski too, but I'm excited to see how Juban looks in his debut. Wow, close betting lines. Basinski's the favorite, but not by much. Minus 137, ranging to minus 150. Juban is about plus 120 as the underdog across the board, and that is a lot closer than I had anticipated. All right, last three fights here. This one I'm kind of looking forward to as well, although I did kind of, as soon as it was announced, I was veering towards one fighter for my pick. Tim Boetsch versus Brad Tavares. I don't know whose fucking turn it is to go first. Someone go.
Connor.
Okay. Tim Boetsch looked really good not long ago, then has looked really bad ever since. I don't know what's happening. I don't know why it happened. Tim Boetsch can either be really on and be really tough, or he can look incredibly one-dimensional and look like he's just clueless at every aspect of the game. So I don't know. I mean, against Rockhold, he got wiped out, so there's really no reading that fight. But against Dalloway, like, that's, once again, going back to Dallas's principle, what was Tim Boetsch doing at any point of the CB Dalloway fight to win? He was just throwing lead right hands and going for half-assed takedowns against the fence over and over and over and over. He didn't change anything up, which surprised me because when we saw him fight Yushin Okami, he showed that he can adapt and change up and go for, throw in a little more aggression when needed, but also throw out some unique techniques and go for a different approach when he's clearly down, I don't know. Tim Boetsch's run recently has been frustrating for a guy that I really like and who has put on some of my favorite performances in the UFC. I mean, he's really a fun fighter to watch when he's on, but it's just dull and depressing when he's not. I don't know what the deal is. Brad Tavares he's pretty awesome. I mean, Brad Tavares is very well rounded. He's the kind of guy. He's kind of a John Fitchie type of fighter, where he's not. I think his loss to Yoel Romero was telling. I'm trying to explain what I'm saying here and losing the tack, but John Fitch has been renowned as the guy who's not athletic but is a hard worker and just kind of nose to the grindstone kind of fighter. And that's why that kind of fighter basically always gets beaten by an equally tough but more talented fighter like GSP. Well, Brad Tavares met that matchup in Yoel Romero. Romero, who's, you know what I mean, just as talented and 3 times as athletic, strong and powerful and fast, and it showed. And yet, Brad Tavares has still beaten tons of guys that he was not expected to beat just by being tough and not quitting and just wearing you down over and over. Takedowns, underrated wrestling game, although I think he's catching a little more praise for his wrestling as of late, as we realize that he uses it to win most of his fights. I'm rambling. I guess Brad Tavares is going to win. I would love to see a vintage Tim Boetsch performance, but I think that Boetsch is pretty clearly on the decline. He doesn't even seem to have the aggression. It's like he's just been broken by his tough run lately. Whereas Tavares, I think, is still capable of coming back from the kind of loss he had against Romero. And the thing that's encouraging is, in his fight with Romero, Tavares was still trying to win at the end. I mean, also like John Fitch, he was resourceful. He was changing things up, and he was still in the fight even as he was being dominated. So, whereas the story of every last one of Boetsch's last 4 fights has been him not being resourceful and not coming up with new answers to the changing questions of his opponent's attack. So, pretty easy Brad Tavares pick for me here.
Just throwing my 2 cents before I hand it over to Zane, I think, first of all, a question, because I was actually really amazed and impressed. What fight was Tim Boetsch behind on? And they were grappling, and he started flowing into all kinds of fucking toe holds, in knee bars, and like really showing an active submission grappling game. Is that ringing a bell to any of you guys? It was late in the fight. It was obvious he was down, and he was showing a lot of submission game that we had never seen.
Maybe Mark Munoz? Was it against Munoz?
I don't even remember what fight it was in, but either way, so that really impressed me, and I thought, man, for a guy who sometimes needs more weapons or more ways to finish, like shit, where has that been? Interestingly enough, I think he did that off his back, meaning he didn't take the guy down and have control from top position.
Yeah, I believe that was against Munoz that he tried going for some desperation submissions while he was getting pounded on.
It was clearly desperation, but I liked it to know he has that aspect of his game. And to conclude, my thoughts on this are that people have kind of figured Tim Boetsch out, and that is he is deadly, but he has to be in contact range. He has to be able to clinch up, have his hands on you, be able to manipulate you physically. If he gets stuck out in open space, his striking, and his entries, the way that he blends those to try to get into where he needs to be, I think are just kind of predictable. It's a lot of straight line, and people now kind of know he's going to chuck a couple strikes on his way in, or he's going to stand out there and just strike, waiting for that moment when he's going to throw something and try to charge in and get his hands on me. I think Tavares' takedown defense, like Connor said, used to be obscenely underrated. People are into it now. I think that's going to make it real tough for Tim to work his game. Your turn, Zane Simon.
Yeah, we're heading into 2 matches here that I think would have been much better 2 or 3 years ago. And this is one of those fights that, honestly, to me, Boetsch's comeback against Okami was sort of his pinnacle and his breaking point. His fight with Hector Lombard was certainly not a good fight. And
I still think he lost that fight for whatever it's worth.
Exactly. Since then, it's arguable that he's on a 5-fight losing streak. And that's not a good place to be. And, yeah, his fight against Rockhold was just bad. I mean, there's no goodness to take away from that. There's no, he was in it. No, Rockhold just came out, tooled him in 2 minutes, and went home and had a snack,
Brushed
had a
his
light
hair.
lunch. I mean, it was not a good fight. And Tavares, he's always shown that he's a pretty decent, competent kickboxer. He's got a good gas tank. He can keep going for all 3 rounds. He's showing, to me, his real big turning point was his fight against Lorenz Larkin, where he showed that he can actually pour it on and maintain a higher output style, because for a while the big thing that was a question mark for me was, does Tavares ever create enough offense to really beat good middleweights?
Because he was defensive too often, and then just playing off whatever his opponent gave him from his defense.
Yeah,
right?
like against Bubba McDaniel, he actually let Bubba McDaniel back into that fight in the 3rd round and got hit and beat up a bit because he just wasn't creating enough offense and was sitting and waiting on his opponent, looking to see what they would do. And against Lorenz Larkin, he just turned it around, just beat him up for 15 minutes, and just kept it on him, poured it on him. And of course, Romero just didn't even give him the chance. Romero just came out and, for the first time in his career, just decided to say, you know what? I'm 5,000 times better wrestler than you will ever be in your life. And maybe I should just use that instead of screwing around and seeing what else I can make work.
But even in that, wasn't Tavares pretty competitive in the 3rd round? Like he was.
Tavares stayed in the fight. Like he definitely didn't ever get just pounded out. Like, he's a tough guy. He stays active. He stays
and
scrappy.
Resourceful.
He's resourceful.
And Romero is a freak. Like we were talking before about Sarah McMahon. Romero is an Olympic wrestler, an insane athlete, and just a volatile striker as well.
And he just showed that the moment he actually wants to just wrestle, there's nothing you are going to do to stop him from out wrestling you.
How scary is that? An Olympic wrestler who uses it as like an ace up his sleeve. By the way, I have this other trick when I was in the Olympics.
And so I don't put any knock on Tavares for that at all. I think he's probably coming into his prime as a fighter. He's been in the game for about 7 years now, and it really feels like he's rounding out as a nice high-output kickboxer. I don't know that he's going to knock Boetsch out because he doesn't knock anybody out, but I think he could handily beat him up for 3 rounds. And it could be a really ugly fight.
And out-wrestle him. Honestly, I think he's probably going to out-wrestle Tim Boetsch, too, because Mark Munoz did, and Munoz has some of the most underwhelming MMA wrestling in the division.
Yeah, Tavares is basically like supplanting Bisping as the next Bisping. The guy who's going to come in, be a high-output kickboxer, and throw in just enough wrestling to keep opponents off balance all fight.
It's kind of insulting to most, but that's a kind of an accurate correlation between Bisping and Tavares. Tavares is a young dude.
He's not fragile the way that Bisping is.
No,
his chin is rock. He's a Hawaiian. I don't know what
Bisping's a glass cannon, but without the cannon. Bisping's like a glass water pistol. You know what I mean?
By the point Bisping got his knocked out for the first time, that was that Dan Henderson
Hendo.
fight.
Yeah.
He'd been that was 5 years in. Yeah, okay, that's reasonable. I thought he'd actually been had a lot more time on the regionals before then. I know he'd had a kickboxing career before that, but I thought he'd been around a lot longer.
So we're unanimous on Tavares. He's a young dude too, right? Like 26.
Yeah,
26, yeah.
he's 26, 27. He's already fought for quite a while though.
And so I agree really strongly with what you said, Zane, is that for as long as we've seen this dude, he's just now entering his prime.
Yeah.
Like all the greatest years are ahead of him. So he's shown it, and we should expect improvements anywhere from subtle to significant in every fight. That's the beauty of a
I
guy like that.
expect him to look like he did in the Lorenz Larkin fight. I mean, that's the fight I expect out of Tavares for the foreseeable future, hopefully.
And I think we all agree it would be nice for him to really amp up his offensive potency too, because he's been defensive. And I understand that I'm not knocking him because he was a younger guy getting his feet wet against guys with big weapons. I think now it's time for him to, really, I guess.
Well, and that
really,
was the Larkin fight. He
first time he really showed
Yeah.
that. I agree.
that was the first time he really showed that he could be an aggressive striker and create all of his own opportunities.
All right, no love for Boch on the betting line. He's an underdog, plus 210 to plus 220 in Tavares. This is probably some of the heaviest he's been of the favorite yet, minus 260 to 270. All right, we're moving on to our final two fights. Gray Maynard and Ross Pearson. Kind of a weird fight. To me, the thing that makes this hard is the big question mark above Gray Maynard. And I'm not usually the kind of guy to do that, but he's had some very uncharacteristic performances since he was at his apex. Connor, go on this one first.
Man, Gray Maynard is a fighter who he just seems to be missing that little bit of fluidity or that transition game that we were talking about with Zach Makovsky to be really special, because Gray Maynard is a potent wrestler and he is a good boxer. He really is a solid boxer. Like, he uses his jab, he has footwork, he has combinations, but as an MMA fighter, he cannot seem to put those two things together. So it's not even like he has the one area where he's really good. He's actually good at all the things, but the combination between them is just not there. It doesn't exist. Whereas I think that Ross Pearson has actually come along a bit in that aspect in terms of combining wrestling, and he's added a few tricks from Muay Thai to his game. He's got some nice knees in the clinch and some good kicks, and he's of course got the boxing that's always been a staple of his style. I think Ross Pearson will continue to hang around as mid-tier from this point on, and Dallas, as you alluded to, I think we're really seeing a sharp decline for Gray Maynard, which is depressing because as a top lightweight, he was a fun and a dangerous fighter. I don't know, man. I don't know what to say about this. I think it's pretty clear that Ross Pearson's going to win, but in the same, I can't get the image of the old Gray Maynard out of my head, because the old Gray Maynard could knock Ross Pearson out. You know what I mean?
What you're struggling to say is that Gray Maynard on paper should win this fight.
Yeah.
Not easily, but I mean, from a matchup, the guy, he's a great boxer and a great wrestler. Seems to be maybe a little more, maybe technical-wise, but power-wise, he's got a little more in his hands than Ross, and he's a better wrestler.
I think
so on paper, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. The fight I always go back to in my head when I'm thinking of Gray Maynard's boxing is his fight with Roger Huerta, who Huerta, like, defensively is not there as a boxer, but is a pretty potent offensive boxer himself, is a dangerous and dynamic striker, or at least was back then. I mean, that was more or less in his prime as well. And Maynard, like, unveiled this great boxing game. He was all over Huerta with these strikes. He was taking angles. His footwork looked really sharp. And Pearson, on the other hand, he has his boxing niche, but he's been outstruck. You know, Cub Swanson beat him up pretty badly. Even against Edson Barboza, which is a fight I thought that he won, he wasn't ever really dangerous enough to shut Barboza, who is a proven glass cannon, down. He doesn't have enough power, or he doesn't have enough, like, ferocity to his game. He's great when he's able to counter you and do these little slips, but even then he can get caught because sometimes he becomes predictable. He has things that he clearly likes to do, and you can draw him into those tendencies and punish him for indulging them. Gray Maynard, I think that Gray Maynard, limited as he is, as you said, should beat Ross Pearson on paper, but I'm not confident that Gray Maynard is Gray Maynard anymore.
just to, I always, for some reason, use the term artistry in the pocket for Ross Pearson when you mentioned his slips and everything, which is, number one, a thing of beauty, but it's like being finesse. It's like being a ballet dancer in a jungle. You know what I mean? I mean, when you're in the pocket, that's where it doesn't take a lot of finesse, technique, timing. There's a high risk for damage. So on one hand, I respect that about his style, that he's not afraid to both stay in the pocket, bob and weave, and form really interesting, not only combinations, but he's like an angle jabber. I mean, he'll take punches, but specifically throw common punches from odd angles, whatever's best suited to get him. So that was just one observation. The other one that I didn't realize, it seems like no one will hesitate to talk about Gray Maynard's punching power. Do you know that he has finished one fight in the UFC, and it was his second UFC fight ever? Joe Veras. Everything else has been a decision, and his only other win or finish was in his very first fight by TKO against a cat named Josh Powell, who is now 0-5. That's really shocking.
Well, there's the Rob Emerson fight too.
The double TKO?
Yeah.
Yeah, but so that definitely doesn't count as a finish. Doesn't count as a finish for Gray. He knocked himself out too.
But he's still,
I think he pretty clearly hits hard, though. He just never really finishes guys with his hands. Like, he knocked Huerta down 3 or 4 times in their fight. He's knocked Frankie Edgar all over the damn place. Yeah. I mean,
that's what's weird, though. Isn't that the dichotomy that we're talking about?
And also, I'm thinking that I don't think of Ross Pearson as a power striker, but he's actually been knocking a lot more people down and out lately.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You know what I mean? He actually knocked Sanchez down, too, which is not exactly an easy thing to do, even if Sanchez is kind of wearing down over time recently.
Yeah, but it is not. I mean, how many people have shit-canned Diego, put him on his ass in a fight with a punch? Very, very few.
He tore Ryan Couture apart. And
with a broken foot.
Yeah, actually, that is strange. I think of Maynard as the more powerful striker, but Pearson has actually been the one improving his striking, whereas Maynard in his last fight got knocked out by somebody who's not known for being much of a powerful striker.
And I was going to say, that's what kind of adds to the weird mystique about Gray Maynard now, is there's no question, watch the dude punch. He's got huge punching power. He's athletic. He's explosive. He's a great wrestler, but not quite sure what the deal is.
And good technique on his punches.
Yeah, he's like an old school boxer to me. Nothing flashy, real short little 6 to 10 inch punches with a lot of heft behind him. He's got talent.
He's good at simultaneous counters. Pearson loves the inside slip to left hook. Maynard is very good at hitting cross counters and throwing it at the same time. That's why I think Pearson's great at stepping into these short jabs and everything. But against the old Gray Maynard, I can easily envision him just lunging head first into a counter right hand from Gray Maynard and getting put down.
And I was just going to say, this is random, and I'll turn it over to Zane after this, but I want to say Gray Maynard has a big, nasty meat hook of a right hook club, and Pearson not only likes to dip under and throw his left hook, but he likes to throw it low to the body. It's not always up high. Even if he throws it to the head, it's more of like an uppercut or an angle, like I was saying. So that, again, would seem that it could be trouble for him with Gray's power. Zane, from your reclined position?
Yeah. So, okay. After all that,
this is Zane's way of being like, are you two done jacking each other off for the last 5 minutes? Or what? He's all reclined, like, whenever you're ready, guys.
Sorry, but after all that, 4 years ago, Gray Maynard crushes Ross Pearson. And I say that as somebody who loves Ross Pearson. These days, there's no way Gray Maynard wins this fight. And honestly, the reasoning, the point was, and I said it at the time. Actually, I said it after he got knocked out by Frankie Edgar, but that split decision draw crushed him. I think that broke Gray Maynard from his future in fighting. And he's looked like a shell of the same fighter since, honestly. I think much more than the knockout did. That was that was the fight that he's going to regret forever. And I hate to say that, but, that's one of those haunting moments of I would have been champion. Yeah. And
I'm just glad that somebody's expressing a confident opinion about this one, because this is I'm
totally confident in this. And the reason being is that, I mean, Gray Maynard was always continental drift in the ring when it came to foot speed. Like, he's never been a fast fighter when it comes to like footwork, but he's only gotten slower lately. He's gotten slower and more labored,
And
and
chinnier.
I mean, that Guida fight was basically a prime example of just how slow Gray Maynard's footwork is. You
The
know?
thing is, he used to make up with it by being technical. His
Yeah,
footwork, that was how he hung with Huerta in their fight because
yeah,
he had a really good understanding of angles. Like
yeah.
even early on in his career, something that we're still not seeing from many MMA fighters.
Do
No.
you think maybe the Guida fight kind of symbolized his, I don't know what to call it, frustration, but I mean, he was like mad at Clay Guida because he wouldn't let him get his hands on him.
Yeah.
It symbolized how broken
Impotent.
his game had become because you've got a fighter, you're mad at them because you can't catch them. How stupid is that? Like, you're basically just being mad about your own limitations.
Yeah.
You
Don't you
know?
kind of imagine that Gray Maynard like goes home and like curses a picture of Frankie Edgar?
Yes, I think he does. I think, like, I gotta imagine he's just sitting there with, like, watching that fight on replay, like that first fight on replay over and over again.
With like a can of Pabst in his hand.
Yeah.
But
Just
so,
like
we're not clowning on him. Think about as a human being being, I mean,
No,
as
yeah,
close as you can possibly get to
yeah.
the world champion, number one. I mean,
It's
my heart
crushing.
goes out to him.
It's rightfully crushing. I don't clown. I'm not saying like, oh, I mean, that would haunt me. You build your whole career around winning this title, and you get there. You, you put on the fight of your life, and to half the people out there, you won it. That fight was not just a split decision draw. Like, that was there were a lot of people who thought he won that fight,
And
and
that it
I'm
maybe
not
even
saying,
should have been stopped.
or that it should have been stopped. And I'm not saying that he necessarily did win it. I'm just saying that he can look at that every day and say that belt was mine, and it wasn't. It's a draw, and he went back. He got an immediate second crack at it, and he got knocked out, and that's crushing. I mean that you know, age and wear aside, that is crushing.
also against somebody that he had beaten.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Against
he
somebody
knows he was capable of
already
beating Frankie Edgar.
beaten. Yeah, and so, I mean,
This is sad. This is a really sad episode of Vivisection.
It's
This,
like
this-
Uncle Rico land.
I mean-
real.
yeah. So Ross
Right there.
Pearson does not look like he's taken a step back. He has problems with fighters who can aggressively rush him because he's also foot slow. He does not have great speedy footwork. He can't catch up to people really easily. I mean, you saw that in the Ryan Couture fight in Parsha. That was the foot injury, but he does he does have to kind of chase people down and corner them to really get into his game. But Maynard can't corner Ross Pearson. He's not going to cut him off. And Ross Pearson's way more comfortable in the pocket at this point, and Gray Maynard's chin has degraded quickly. And I can't see anything other than a first-round knockout for Ross Pearson.
Well,
Wow.
he is the favorite. Pearson's at 130, 120 to minus 135, and Gray Maynard. It's a pretty tight line though. Gray Maynard's a slight underdog at plus 100 to plus 115, and I think Connor, our hesitation is that if Gray Maynard did come out and look like the old Gray Maynard, we would, say, well, Jesus, why did we think it was impossible? And it is legitimate because I can't necessarily put my finger on why the Gray Maynard, the potential we see in him hasn't really come to fruition. Besides
he's
the whole
35
Uncle Rico, Frankie.
I think it's
Yeah.
I think it's tough to say because Gray Maynard was a guy who at his prime was champion material, and
Yeah.
Ross Pearson never will be champion material.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet
That's
Gray Maynard has been declining since his days of being champion material, whereas Ross Pearson, despite still being mid-tier, if upper mid-tier guy, has actually been adding new tools to his game and kind of looking crafty. It looks like he's been learning from his experiences and his mistakes. Gray Maynard just keeps doing the same thing, but he's not as good at doing it anymore.
Yeah,
with
I
the
think
story.
the improvement we all expected or hoped for from Ross Pearson right out of Tough is happening now. Like there was a
Yeah,
little lull where it's not like it got worse, but all of a sudden now he's getting comfortable and really starting to put things together
yeah.
well.
And like I said, he's got like some good kicks. He's got nice knees in the clinch. He's improved his wrestling. His jiu-jitsu looks pretty solid from what little we've seen of it.
Hmm.
He's actually he's showing some new things, where he was pretty one-dimensional before. And Gray Maynard was excellent at being one-dimensional, and is now not good at being one-dimensional. It's just I think Gray Maynard's style maybe was just built on some kind of mental strength or athleticism that
Yeah.
his body doesn't have it anymore, and so his style hasn't changed to account for his very real physical deterioration. Like I mean,
Yeah.
like Zane said, he's slower than ever before, and he's no longer even fast enough to make his slow plodding style work.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the main event here because after this, I feel like I never want to do a vivisection, appear on the internet, nor discuss MMA for a long time. All right, so this is the headliner, OSP, Oven St. Preux versus Ryan Bader. We're going to let Zane go first on this one, but I have just a general question to the class. There was one fight that I forgot to research that I wanted to. When Masasi fought OSP, did he not take him down somewhat regularly? Again, I'm going from memory. I could be confusing any of the aforementioned parties with unicorns or dragons.
That was 3 years ago. I have no idea.
Did who take? I saw that fight. Did who take who down?
Didn't
Musasi.
Musasi take OSP down?
That was
Somewhat.
Musasi's. That was the fight where we watched it. And people who were hoping to see Musasi actually put in some work in the gym and improve something were finally encouraged that he might be capable of doing that, because yes, he actually showed not only some takedowns but some like Condit-esque counter wrestling. He was hitting some switches and stuff like that
Switches,
from his
yep.
back and countering takedowns, and
Yeah.
like moving from his back into a single position and then taking OSP down. So yes, I believe you were right. Musasi showed unprecedented wrestling skill against OSP.
Gotcha. All right. So obviously my thoughts on that were the most base of all, and that is Ryan Bader, a pretty accomplished wrestler. If Musasi can do it, it's a little MMA mathish. But all right, go ahead, Zane.
It's also 3 years of considerable development for OSP.
Yeah.
That he's only shown in his last two fights, though, right? And I'm not being
Uh,
a dick. I was on the OSP train a long time ago, and
no, I would say that he has. Well, I'd say he's shown over his last 3 fights. He has been thoroughly dominant since a really mediocre fight over John Vellante. Um, but yeah, so for me, this is actually a great fight that I'm really excited for, because it's matching up two not top tier, but upper tier light heavyweights in the prime of their careers. And it's really hard for a lot of people to remember that with Ryan Bader, because he came into the UFC 1 year into his pro career. So we've seen him over, the past, let's see, that was 6 years, all while he's been developing as a professional fighter. And just now, he's finally hitting his stride and finally putting it all together and finally looking like a polished, finished product in the cage. And because it takes a long time, these things, people, they get excited about a guy 2 or 3 years into his career, and they're like, oh, well, why isn't he developing? Why hasn't he gotten way better? And it might not happen until 7 or 8 years in, usually like six-ish. And that's where Ryan Bader is, and also on the other hand, that's also where OSP is. He's been fighting since 2008, and we're now just seeing in this run over Donovan, Krylov, and Jimmo, OSP looks thoroughly dominant, and OSP is now at the point where he can thoroughly dominate lower tier UFC light heavyweights. Where anybody in the bottom half of the division, he's going to beat without breaking a sweat.
like Bader did
And
on his
so,
way up.
yeah. And so I still think that Ryan Bader's probably just a little bit better than OSP. Um I think that his wrestling base is is a better base for him to have built a skill set around than OSP just being kind of an athletic dude. Um, and I think it's a well that he can draw on a lot more in difficult fights. And he's showing more recently that he's willing now to just draw on that well and to work in that avenue where he has success. And OSP, while he's really gotten the fluidity in his striking game and in his overall game down, he's not the kind of dominant striker that I think is just going to go out there and really put it on somebody in the upper half of the division. And so at that point, I can see this being kind of a scrappy grind, but I think that Bader probably takes the decision. And I think it's a quality main event. I mean, it's not like the main event everybody wants, maybe, but I do think it's great to see a main event of two fighters that are really peaking right now.
Agree with all that. Connor?
I'm behind that. I think this is a great relevant matchup between two guys who are each of these guys could be title contenders in a year or two if they put together a string of good wins. But it's relevant upper mid tier light heavyweights, which is a division that desperately needs relevant fighters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a division where the vast majority of the fights are between one guy who's pretty good and one guy who's washed up. And
Yeah.
we're actually seeing a light heavyweight contest between two guys who are doing the best they've ever done right now.
Two guys that we could see still headlining UFC cards potentially in 2, 3, 4 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing the difference we've seen in Bader's career in his past two fights, that was even, actually, you know what? The thing is that we even saw this improvement against Teixeira, but we also saw it start to fall apart, which is discipline. I think that we're finally seeing Bader's experience paying off. He finally has a few years of experience under his belt, and he's developed some kind of discipline that I think it took him a little while after the Machida fight, against Ortiz, not to start freaking out when he gets in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Teixeira fight, he learns not to start freaking out when he starts winning. You know what I mean? He was about to beat one of the best fighters he'd ever fought, and then went completely nuts and got knocked out.
Yeah.
Threw everything out the window. And against Parash and against Feijão, both of those were very disciplined, dominating performances. And Feijão had him in trouble, and he had Feijão in trouble, and at neither of those times did he lose his composure and go crazy going for the knockout or going on a complete defensive. When Feijão stunned him in round 3, he just kind of casually took him down and started doing what he did to Anthony Parash. And he's also showed some pretty good boxing. Shout out to to our BE members who will say that Bader is not a bad boxer by any means.
That's right.
But at this point, I think that's actually a fair statement. He's a pretty solid fundamental boxer. He's got openings that are still there. He's got a very counterable jab, but he's also pretty potent on the feet. And he's more than ever before going to the well with his wrestling and using it in conjunction with his boxing. He's kind of becoming a light heavyweight Jamie Varner. You know what I mean? He's got the same kind of skill set where he's got solid boxing, he's kind of hittable, but his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu back it up. He's capable of submitting you or taking you down or beating you up on the feet. He's a well-rounded guy.
Semantics, but I'd say he's a little bit more like Chad Mendez just because he's a dominant wrestler. Jamie always has to work so hard for those takedowns. That was a stupid comment. I don't know why I put it in there. What? I admitted it. We're 2 hours into this bitch.
All right.
OSP, on the other hand, I think athletic guy, as Zane said, is the best way of summing up his game. And he's good at being an athletic guy, but he's just not very technical in anything he does. Everything is built on that athleticism. And, I mean, his striking against Ryan Jimmo, like, it worked. He showed against Jimmo that he's now understanding range on the feet, but he still doesn't have the setups to fight somebody else who also understands range that well. Yeah. So it's just like lead right, overhand rights and stuff like that, whereas Bader's going to work off the jab, he's going to throw that sneaky left hook that he has, and he's going to throw takedowns off of his strike setups and level changes. I think good competitive fight. I wouldn't be surprised if OSP won, but I think that I have to go with Bader.
I would probably be surprised if OSP won, but not in a bad way at all. To me, these guys are similar and different. They're similar in that Bader seems to be a couple years ahead, a couple rungs up above where people thought, or where OSP is now. And people were curious if OSP could be the next guy, kind of Bader-esque, to come up and not set the world on fire, but all of a sudden, out of nowhere, be a top 5, light heavyweight in the world. Really early on in his career, I don't know why, I think this is when I just started to do dissection, was really balls out, and this is a Strikeforce card, but I watched a bunch of his old fights. I don't think I saw this one, but OSP hit a calf crusher on somebody in early competition. And Connor, I was going to mention this before, sometimes I look at, with knee bars and stuff like that, I mean, even against a low-level fighter, sometimes that stuff it's not always the other guy sucks. I mean, it's ballsy to both pursue and finish with a calf crusher against any halfway competent opponent. So to me, that was a sign of, his athleticism is obvious, and to me, that's what a lot of people are talking about. But he's had some creative instincts that he's been able to come up with and actually make effective in a fight. And he decided to turn it on. I remember when he came over to the UFC, Nate and I were both saying there's been hype surrounding this guy forever. It's now or never. I mean, we can't keep saying this guy has big potential that could, crystallize someday. I mean, now is the time. So he couldn't have picked a better time to come along and show that he does have the potential to be a great fighter. To me, this entire fight is about how fast he's progressing right now. I don't think there's any question. He's improving. The question is how fast, and is it fast enough to put him at Bader's level right now? I think just based on experience, Bader's been in with like the who's who in the canoe. He's been in with some bad boys. So overall, I do expect Bader to win, but I would really just like to see, even in a loss, OSP come out with something encouraging, whether that's really, and this is risky, but going with something more creative and unexpected that Bader won't expect, but that will also be, riskier, or just to have a real respectable performance against a guy that I don't think anyone's going to be real down on OSP if he loses to Bader. Am I right there?
Yeah,
Hopefully
I agree.
not.
Unless he get, of course, if he gets
Yeah.
taken down, he turtles up and takes a Peroche-like beating. And how
People don't have much respect for anybody in light heavyweight outside the top 5, except for Hendo and Shogun, for reasons that now are starting to escape me.
They've always escaped me, apparently. I used to think light heavyweight was one of the most stacked divisions, and it's not. It ain't all that nowadays, but I mean, there's still a lot of legit guys there. The betting lines in this are actually surprisingly close to me. Bader's a favorite, but not by much. Minus 165 to minus 170. OSP's the underdog to a tune of pretty much plus 135 up to 145, which is pretty competitive and kind of surprising to me. I mean, do you guys agree that it has to be based on potential rather than actual accomplishments? I mean,
I guarantee it's based on Bader's losses rather than what I mean. It's based on the fact that Bader just has recent and memorable losses. He's never ever going to completely expunge the stain of the loss to Tito Ortiz from his history.
Yeah.
It's always going to be one of our first things that comes up when you search Ryan Bader.
But going back, go ahead,
No,
Zane.
sorry. Go ahead. I was gonna say it's mostly that Bader's losses have been where he's been utterly dominated, or that he's been knocked out. Like that he's been finished entirely, and OSP doesn't have any memorable losses that anyone cares about.
Well, all of Bader's losses, as Dallas mentioned before, have been in the UFC. But people have been watching him either fail or succeed. He has this kind of the negative of name recognition. We all know the limits of Ryan Bader, whereas most people don't know the limits of OSP.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and when you're losing to guys like Machida, I mean, really the only halfway inexplicable loss is Tito, right?
Yep.
And if you think about it, was Bader not in line for a title shot if he beat Tito? Was that the case, or am I making that up?
No, that was right after his loss to John Jones. So.
Oh, you're right. My bad. But if you think about that, I was actually pretty impressed with the way Bader got back on the horse, came back, and racked up a couple wins, and immediately proved that that was not going to be some breaking moment for him. So I got a lot of respect for him. I mean, he came up strong and flashy. Since then, I think he's just gotten a really good, strong grasp of what he's good at in his game overall, and he has the confidence now and the experience to apply it very effectively. So, but I wouldn't be surprised to see OSP pull out something unexpected or amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's wrap this bitch up. What do you guys say?
Yeah.
See, you guys are so tired. I can't even get a response from you.
I began the show by saying how excited I was for this card, and now I just want to die.
Yeah, no, I hate it. I don't even want to.
I hate
All right,
this
seriously.
card.
You know, I don't know who these damn 26 viewers are, but whenever I do a show with Nate and Eugene, there'll be a certain amount of viewers, and then it'll steadily, they'll start to die off like flies. Man, whoever you 26 are, man, I love you. I would buy you a fruit basket if I knew who you were.
Yeah, we got to give a big shout out to people who have been watching this all the way through, because, you know, it certainly has gone off the rails a couple times.
A couple times. This whole damn thing, it started off the rails. I'm not even sure if we got back on. So I'm pointing to you with affection, you 26 viewers out there. Honestly, I mean, it's kind of good to know that there's some hardcores out there. Either that or you just forgot you left the stream open.
That's right.
I appreciate it, man. All right, damn it, I'm supposed to do some kind of Kid Nate shit. What does he always say? Remember to like us.
Yeah, remember to like it.
So like us,
watch all our other videos. Go to Bloody Elbow.
Subscribe to MMANation.com. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends. You can find all of us on Twitter at Boxing Bush, at The Zane Simon, at Uncle Justice for Dallas, and of course, please check out BloodyElbow.com for more of your favorite MMA coverage.
That's the creepiest thing I've seen in quite some time.
That was like a bad acid trip, but I love it. God, Connor, you can tell Connor wants to get the hell out of here because that is the most concise and motivated he's ever been. All right, seriously. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks for doing the show. Thanks for watching. Bye.